Welcome back, everybody, to Too Much Popcorn, the movie review podcast where Jamie and I watch a movie, and then we sit down, we talk about the things we liked about the movie, the things we didn't like, the highs, the lows, yada, yada, yada. And this week, we talked about the hit 1986 movie, Aliens.
Is this the first time you've said it's a hit and it's actually been a hit?
That could be very
Unironically.
true. This could... Well, I don't know. Shrek 2 was a hit.
The hit sensation, Shrek 2.
That's why Britney Spears put out that song a couple days later that was Hit Me Baby One More Time. She was like, give me another Shrek.
Shrek 3, when are we getting it? Release date now. You're right. I forgot that most of Britney Spears' catalog of music is about asking when the next movie she wants is going to be released.
Well, not just that. It's mainly just Shrek. She was a huge Shrek head.
Shrek head. Does she own the... Never mind. Okay, we're talking about aliens. We got Jim Cameron on the horn.
Yeah.
Jim, how's... Dude, that'd be so funny.
It looks like we're having some problems with his microphone. He is talking. James, your microphone... Okay,
we're video coming through. Sorry, we're gonna just have to wing it here. No research per usual. We're gonna talk about Jim. We gotta hang up on you. We can't hear you.
Well, we'll leave him on.
Talk to you.
We'll leave him on the call. Maybe he can come up with some sign language for us.
Like you can tell, he's screaming at us. Okay, well, either way, we talked about nothing yet. We were gonna talk about aliens. It's 1986. Imagine you're sitting in a theater and you watched this just horrifying. What a vibe of this movie. I can't get over. This is one of those, like, you think of it in a movie theater and you just see the red curtains on the side and you go, the cinema. There is so much good in this movie. You got Sigourney Weaver. She's back. She's kicking ass. You got a whole host of characters that are perfectly layered out throughout the film, that are pro keeping an alien alive, anti keeping anything alive. There's so many differing sort of interwoven storylines that are just, they wrap up in a nice little bow and you get this whole, just one of the best written movies of the year 1986, of the past 30 to 40 years, maybe. I think this is one of those films where you can just look at any line of dialogue, game over, man, game over, and just point to it and go, hey, that's a Hallmark film right there.
No, you're absolutely right. And, just the vibe alone of this movie had such a good vibe that whoever made Halo Combat Evolved was like, we're just going to do that. Because this movie, let's get one thing right, folks, is just Halo Combat Evolved, from, the great ornery sergeant who's leading them down to the angry pits of hell to fight aliens, to the space marines that all have this snarky attitude. And then, and then towards the end, when you get this great countdown to a, crazy explosion, and it's just like, yeah, all of those things were... The only thing that was missing from this movie was a ring-based, planet that this was taking place on. Hey, you don't know.
They never showed...
No, they did.
The alien planet. I'm going to choose it's a ring. You never know. It was a ring world the whole time.
Yeah. Well, no, James did show us the planet, and, as always, he does just amazing visuals. He has great visuals of big old spaceships out in space hovering over planets. It looks great. He has great miniatures as you go down to the planet, and he shows you the little colony that is now on this horrible alien planet. And yeah, it's just like the dude did it. And then you get inside those buildings and it's just like atmospheric. the lighting in there, the smoky, like, just, ooh, there's smoke about. He did really well with setting up just a vibe for this movie.
It's not only that it was just a vibe, it was throughout the film you get different vibes too. And there's the overarching just alien plot, you know, you go into the planet, you know bad things are going to happen. But there's so many cool and very different beats in this where you're seeing the very isolated first look into it, and there's a difference between what you're seeing and then like Ripley's in a totally different area, and you're like, well, get Ripley in here, come on. These Marines, their cameras, it's been a plot point that they're shitty. And so we have to see this sort of like very SD shaky cam footage that sells just the sort of first encounter style of the first go through where you're like, well, it seems abandoned. We find a girl. The second go through where you're like, seems abandoned. Uh-oh, there's a lot of motion on the things. And there's this underlying tension that Cameron, the set designers, the actors, everybody nails in terms of this growing sense of fear, because I haven't seen the first Alien in a long time. And I remember it being the same type of thing where you go, oh, something, the chest burster scene is what you can point to in terms of, oh, everything's bad now. Like there was a tension up to, you know, oh no, something happened. He had the face hugger. We got to save him. He's on the table. And then the bleh, and you're like, oh no. And then Aliens has pretty much beat for beat that same sort of vibe where you're like, oh no, something bad definitely has happened here, but we have to investigate further because we know that there should be colonists. There should be some reason to like be heroes and like save people here. And we found a girl, which means like survivors. That's good, right? And everyone else is like, this is great. We found one alive. That could be so many more. And Ripley the whole time is just like, folks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know.
You know, it is interesting, like, when you talk about the first one, like, it is called Alien, right? And so, you know, you're introduced to the face hugger first, which latches on to one of the crew members, and you're like, all right, well, that was it. That was the alien, and that was just a horrible experience. And then it dies, and you're like, oh, okay, well, that's creepy. But then the chest burster comes out, and it turns into the xenomorph, and you're like, oh, that's the guy. That's the guy that the movie's about.
That's the one. That's the alien.
And then James Cameron comes into the meeting room, the big 1980s meeting room afterwards, and he puts Alien up on the board, and they're like, James, we did this. And he pulls out a marker, and they're like, oh, he's just going to put a two after it.
Aaron, you silly goof. They said they brought Cameron in, and they had Alien sequel on the board. And he takes out an eraser, and he just erases equal, and they're like, oh.
Yeah.
Had to be that.
But he did a great job of just being like, all right, in the first one, there's one. And in this one, there's buttloads. And
many.
Yeah.
Many.
So many. There's also, to go off of that, and you also kind of briefly mentioned it, you know, everybody, you're probably out there wondering, you're like, guys, why are you doing another sequel without talking about the first one? And of course, we're going to talk about the first one a little bit. But I think one of the things that makes this movie just truly great is you can watch this one without seeing the first one.
100%.
And it totally stands up. And that's, you know, for some reason, my dad decided when I was, 12, 13, that he was like, hey, we're going to sit down, we're going to watch Aliens. And I was like, why aren't we watching Alien? And he was like, no, trust me, this is the one. And I'm like, okay. But it was.
And I see, your dad's not wrong.
Yeah. Because I remember from that point being like, this is it. You know, he showed me this movie and he showed me Blade Runner, and I was like, that's it. Those are my two vibes. Aliens, Blade Runner. That's it.
And now we have Aaron as he is today, and he's just a creepy little guy.
And I love hunting robots.
You'll never see a picture of Aaron because he has a creepy skeleton tail that he'll sort of like attack your camera.
And a cool coat.
Very cool coat. Oh, the fit checks in this movie are so sick. just Ripley is dripped out every scene. She gets a cool jacket. She gets a cool jumpsuit. She's got those cool like Nike kicks on.
They're Reeboks, actually.
Whatever. They're fucking sick shoes, and they're from the future because it's confirmed that James Cameron has found a wormhole and he's sent the cameras there. And they somehow have Sigourney Weaver in the future. I don't know how they did it, but she's there. Cryo freezing.
Yeah. Fully confirmed that that's the only way he makes movies, is for this movie, he sent a probe out into space, into the future, and found, the remains of the Sulaco and was like, all right, now we're making aliens. And in the other one, he brought a Terminator through and he was like, all right, you German Terminator, we're going to make a movie. And it was like, okay.
Do you know any Spanish? Hasta la vista. You got it.
You got it. You got the part. And then, he did that with probably sent a probe back into time to video the Titanic.
Well, that's the thing. A Terminator is actually a deep language learning model. So, of course, it would know a little Spanish here and there.
Yeah.
It just landed on the German accent.
Yeah. And then he, now for some reason. All right. So I think that's something I want to talk about is why does Jim, Jim, all right.
He's still yelling.
Yeah. Jim, I got to pose this question to you.
He went and he got a sandwich and he's back and he's eating the sandwich and he's kind of like throwing the lettuce at his camera whenever.
Yeah. Do you have a whiteboard or something you can write on for us? No.
The one where you wrote the aliens?
Yeah. You didn't say that?
Meeting?
Okay.
Okay.
But Jim, why do you make just such great movies? And for some reason, you've just decided that Avatar is now your thing. Because I, personally, this is just me, want more Aliens and Terminator 2 and name it. Name it, I want it.
Titanic, dude. Like
I'll take Titanic too.
Even a historic sort of James Cameron vibe to that movie is, an all-timer.
Yeah.
He's decided Avatar is his new thing.
Yeah, and like that's it. I don't want sequels per se. I don't want sequels of other movies that he does, and I don't want even more sequels to Avatar. Nothing wrong with Avatar, just don't want more sequels of it. I just want more of him taking either IPs and just making them better, or taking and making his own IPs and just doing a lot of them.
Well, that's the thing.
I don't know.
He's made so much money from Avatar that he has to keep going, but also he has 800 hours of real life footage from Pandora that he has to sift through to make the next 3 to 4 movies.
It's fair. James, I'm sorry. I take back the question. I get that you only have your space probes. Do what you got to do, I guess.
He sent, there was one probe, ended up in the past, got all the Titanic, shots. I don't know how he did that one, but temporal sort of dilation there. But Jim, we love what you're doing, but it is sort of like you had a variation to what you were doing, and now we're just seeing Avatar. I get that you want to be at the helm, Jim. I understand that. I would want to be at the helm too if it's something I'm very invested in. We know now there's at least 2 additional Alien films that were helmed by other people. We got David Fincher on the 3rd one. We got the guy from Amelie, I think, did the 4th one. So I understand you weren't, that was sort of Ridley Scott starting the whole thing. And so that's not really your purview to just helm the rest of the Alien franchise. But again, you did such a good job on this one. It'd be so interesting to see your take on not even another franchise. Just put Avatar, shelve it for a year. I know now it takes maybe 6 years to put out the next Avatar. We'll see that. But I don't know. You're just really you've glimpsed Pandora, and you can't put it back in the box. I understand.
Yeah, just some more IPs would be great, because you definitely have a way of taking movies and just making them your own and just making vibes. And, clearly that's what you did with this one. You said, hey, I know that there's already a whole vibe from the first one. James, just you're making vibes, and I totally appreciate it about you. I want more vibes and new vibes. I don't know.
It's wild because he is still such a visionary in terms of the product that he is putting out. You know, I haven't seen Way of Water yet, but what I've heard is cool, and I'm very excited to watch it. And that's what I like. And I know I'm seeing a Jim Cameron movie. I'm excited to see what he can do. Even his previous, there was like that water, not
Abyss.
like the really old one. Yeah, the Abyss.
Yeah.
That one's crazy, and again, revolutionary in its own way. And the Terminators he was involved with, it was these. So many people were like, "Well, we gotta make James Cameron movies now." And I think if you have that much of an impact on the landscape of film, then hopefully it would behoove you to use that influence to make more of a body of work that doesn't feel just like Avatar now. And it feels sad to me because it's like he's probably making billions of dollars.
Yeah.
Like they're just worldwide box office smash every time. And I'm like, well, if you make that much money, why not? And if you're super involved with it and, you know, you feel like you're indebted to like finish the story that you've started, it makes sense. It totally makes sense. Like with this movie, I could see him being like, I'm done with aliens, right?
Yeah.
Like there's no more need for James Cameron to dip back into this pool. And I'd be like, perfect, cut the ties. You're done. You did it perfectly. Move on to something else. And he did. And for this to be an 86 Cameron product is like so, I mean, just obvious as to his rise. Because we talked about it with even Ambulance, like Michael Bay, right? It was his visionary, his way of filmmaking was what then people were like, oh, well, we need to do this now. And James Cameron, I think, was the proto to Michael Bay in terms of like Michael Bay being like, well, I need to make a Jim Cameron film, but I'm going to do it my own way. And then there's all these other people who are, I mean, like if you're going to learn from the master, like this is the guy you buy that, you know, like I'm James Cameron. I have the master's. He's putting a link. He's holding a piece of paper that just has the link to his like master's course on it. And I'm like, you could have typed something like, hello, hi, sorry, my mic's not working, whatever.
I do like that. And I think that's one of the things I do like about James Cameron. James, it's one of the things I like about you as a director. I know, again, still you're over there. Looks like you are fumbling with cables now. I don't know if that's helping.
There's so many cables.
Yeah. Wow. Is that? I think that's no. That one's connected to your 3D. Oh, don't know. Okay. Yeah. But
okay, I did see like an R, like a 3. You know, the red, yellow, and white. Like, why do you have that?
Yeah.
Is he plugging in a GameCube? What?
It's one of the things I like about him. I'll just talk as if you're not here for now, James. It's one of the things I like about him.
He lost the feed for
yeah. It's one of the things I like about him as a director is that, you know, 86 is roughly the time that some of the Indiana Joneses were coming out, and it's the time that the Star Wars franchise was wrapping up. And, like, it's clear that those things were inspired. You know, Spielberg was doing his thing. Lucas was doing his thing. You had other people that were trying to emulate it in their own way. And then James is just over there, and he's like, hey, you know what? Robots. I do really cool big robots, and I'm going to do a lot of them.
Yep.
And then I also do really strong females really well. And you're like, hey, man, yeah. I don't know. He did his own thing.
Well, and Sigourney Weaver is so good as Ripley, as just like the monolith of that character, changing sci-fi for years onward. Everyone's just like, well, we got to have another Ripley.
Yeah.
She's the best one. She's so cool. She looks cool. She talks cool. She still has like a very human element to her and this like connection to Newt. And in this film specifically, you're like, for a film that has consistently been about this sort of like bodily autonomy and like pregnancy in some way, like Alien is just like, well, your face got raped by an alien and you have now birthed this thing. And the later movies do sort of keep going with that theme. I think the third one does it a little better than the fourth one, goes way off the rails. But there is something to this that James Cameron nails in terms of like a motherhood and the like negatives of like a brood mother of an alien, like having this like evil presence that is just breeding and creating these creatures, and like that's the bad one. And then you have like the opposite of that with Sigourney Weaver just being this like nurturing positive influence to Newt, and that's like super fun to watch. And you get to kill aliens the whole time, and it's really chunky and crunchy and just the best sort of late 80s action you're like looking for.
Dude, I absolutely love it. And Ripley is one of my favorite like sci-fi protagonists of all times, because you look at the, you know, supporting cast in this, and it's all these just buff macho Marines, where, you know, you got the pilot who's a female, and then you got the buff Latina who's also a female. Yeah. And it's like, then you got all these just buff macho, you know, jarhead dudes, and somehow Ripley stands out above all of them and has, you know, she's braver than them, she's stronger than them, she's, you know, more well-spoken than them, and it's just like, they do a good job of setting her apart from them. And although they are very heroic, having her be even more heroic and the true hero.
Yes. Oh my God. They set up the cool shots with her and Hicks too. Just like sexual tension through the roof. You're like, oh my God, James, you didn't have to do that so sexily. Why did you?
Yeah.
Why is the shot so good? Makes me care about characters instantly, because I did not care about the jarheads, and suddenly Hicks is telling her about this gun, you know, the pulse rifle, and going over the specs of it, and oh, don't touch that grenade launcher. And she's like, well, why you tell me about it? And it's just like this great quippy dialogue that is, again, shot in this very James Cameron, just like perfect shot. Sometimes you get like a little handy cam action, and just humanizes these people. And again, it's like jarheads are jarheads. They're dumb as fucking rocks. But you get some that are Vasquez that are like really smart to the effect of too smart for their own good, and start to really fuck shit up when they, you know, re-equip their like mags, but are able to still like do all this welding. And then there's the game over man who is like the computer guy somehow, but he's also just like such a wuss. There's just so much character building in such a short amount of time. And I think all the characters are built by the time they enter the original like hive. You're pretty much set on like who you should care about at that point.
I think that opening shot where they all come out of cryo and they're, you know, walking around doing their thing. What's his name instantly starts complaining, and then Alpone, you know, the sergeant, is out, you know, barking orders at everybody.
Yeah.
You got Vasquez who's doing the pull-ups, and you're like, all right, each of these person has their own thing that they're doing, and I'm recognizing each one of them, and it sets them up really well. And it's like a 10-minute sequence, but you're like, nope, I got one thing for each of them, and that's all I need.
It's really good. I think it's like a hack that James Cameron pretty much does in most movies, but especially this one, where you're like, you now have Ripley in a meeting scene learning about all the shitty stuff the company is still doing 57 years later. And you establish vest-wearing motherfucker who is honestly like the worst guy ever. And you establish pretty early on that he sort of cares for Ripley, but you know that the information that she has is more important to him, because he keeps badgering her about, he's essentially like, well, your deficit to the company is like on me. So I have to remake the like multi-million dollars you lost by blowing up a cruiser. And so we're going back to the planet. Maybe we can salvage this colony, this multi-million dollar. Like the fact that he's always about money, like that's his thing. And you're like, well, there you go. He's the money guy. We hate him.
Yeah.
And there's the android. They set up like the next android who you don't expect to be as pivotal as a character, but really does shine in terms of being really the guy that gets everything, all the shit done.
Yeah.
He's just like, fixing the thing, I'm piloting the thing, and you're like, okay, you're just doing all this stuff. We'll try and survive. And he's like, tippy, 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 I'm gonna hack the computers.
I'm gonna crawl 400 meters through this fucking 1-inch foot pipe that's so claustrophobic and horrible.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
There's that one shot where you just see the pinhole of light that maybe is the exit to that conduit.
Yeah.
Terrifying. Just honestly awful.
He has to crawl through it, and it's like, all right, I know that this is a movie, but they still had to put him in there, and that's just so uncomfy.
And they like closed it back in on him, and there's all this welding and like sparks and
Oh, dude! Anytime they weld any door in this movie, I'm just like, ooh, yeah!
it's so cool.
It's so cool.
And it's just funny because they're just like, like TIG weld it. They're just like putting metal on metal, and you're like, it's still really cool. I feel like they were just actually welding things for the movie.
Yeah,
which is wild.
It was a prerequisite for the actors. They were like, all right, you have to be a great actor, but you also have to know how to weld. And they're, yeah, we do.
They're like, oh, I got my welding license along with my... Yeah. There's so much tension every time there's something being welded, too. It's like the perfect, you're like, somebody's welding something? Uh-oh. Well, something bad's going to happen.
And one of the things I thought that was kind of crazy, and this was like actually something I thought about this time that I saw this movie, and this is probably movie number 5 for times I've seen this movie or something.
Nice.
So
less than Shrek 2.
Yeah. But they're welding the door shut, and it's like, all right, that does allow for a bit of security, but like once those aliens get in there, and if they find a way to bypass that door that is now welded shut, you're in there with them. And so it's like, it's almost a sense of false security where you're like, all right, well, if it's welded, they're out. But now it's like, all right, let's say hypothetically there's a way they get in there. Oh, now you're stuck in there with them because you can't get out that door.
Right. Oh, man.
Yeah. So
it does seem to be like their one thing is like, well, we can weld supports so that it doesn't open. And they're like, and that'll work. And it's like, boop, 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 5 meters.
Yeah. Oh, dude, the use of that little, the proximity sensor that reads movement is so good in this movie where, you're looking at hallways where there's just nothing down there, but it's beeping and you're like, there is something down there and it's closer than they think. And how are the aliens there? It's so good. And the fact that James was just like, hey, what's great? Not seeing these things. And in fact, knowing that they're out there and you're just like, oh, James.
It's way worse than seeing them. It's so much worse. I think that's the one thing I've always wanted to play, that one game, Alien Isolation, because I think that's a core mechanic is the motion sensor. And what a horrific thing to do is put your player in that sort of like, it's close.
Yeah. You have to deal with this thing.
Terrifying. Because it works so well as a tension building device in this movie. And he flips it too, is he uses it to signal that you are in danger, but he also signals that there is, a colonist on the other side of a different beacon type thing. It's the perfect just sort of like, oh, well, we need to get somewhere, put a beacon on it, and we'll beep boop beep, we'll figure it out. Or, oh, we need to get people out of a room because they're in danger. Beep, boop, beep. There's a lot of things on the motion sensor coming at you. It's such a great device, and it's visually really cool to look at and striking in terms of information provided being instantly readable. And then audio-wise is just such a cool sci-fi, like, boop, boop. Yeah, and it's like, it's such an interesting tone that they got for it too.
Oh, Jimmy, I've got my sensor here, and it says that coming down this hallway is ads. Oh no!
Oh no! Quick, weld the door! Oh no, they're coming through!
Ah! All right, back from the break, and it looks like we got Jim again. All right, Jim, it sounds like you got your... Oh. Okay, that looks like the audio's still not working. Sorry about that, folks. We paid him a lot of hot take alert. We paid him a lot of money to be here
Jim,
with us today.
Have you not had the same sort of pandemic situation that we had where everyone had to learn how to use Zoom and stuff? Are you not? You just never sort of... Okay.
He's shaking his head no, yeah.
Shaking his head. Just does not know how to use this program. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I guess we should have used Discord. That's a plug for Discord.
I'm not plugging anything unless they pay us. Fuck Discord.
Well, I'm at. Let's just say the jury's out until Discord decides to give us money for using them.
I'm not taking back anything I've said.
And here's another thing I think worked really well in this movie, and it goes along with the little censor thing, is that James was like, James, again, I'm going to talk about you in the second person, just so you know. He was like, all right, we got a lot of aliens in this movie, but you're not really going to see them fully. Like, you'll see them in full body, you'll see them in certain places, but it's going to be, quick little shots of them. They're either going to be in darkness or obfuscated by something. They're out there. And then he does a lot of that where it's like they're out there and ooh. And it serves the movie really well to, keep them out there and keep them looming because, if you've seen the first one, the damage that just one can do. And if you haven't seen the first one, you don't know what damage they can do, but they make it very apparent once you see them. And that was another thing I thought was interesting too, was the first time the alien shows up in this movie. I checked it. I looked at the little, time counter. It was an hour into the movie. So in a 2.5 hour movie, you don't get them until an hour in, and you're like, that can't be fun. That can't be exciting. But
it's incredible.
The way that they, spin the whole looming and scariness of them being out there is like, all right, even though I haven't seen them for an hour, I'm scared. I'm scared, James.
I think it's a credit to the child actor for Newt, Rebecca, that there is something about her sort of eerie existence in this place. She's found in basically like a rat den. She holed up in this like central area with like snacks and blankets and stuff like that. But the fact that she is the only known survivor and the next like living person you see doesn't last that long. It's the perfect sort of plant in your mind in the movie as a character that is telling you the more of the story than you would get if it was just completely empty. You get the one survivor who was smart enough to just hide and wait it out. Because yes, the inevitability of them, of Newt, like running out of food or being killed in some way is 100% there. But because they're still alive and they are able to, attach themselves to Ripley and serve their like character motivation and story-wise plot, like what a perfect instant character. Like that's the moment in the movie too where you're fully expecting to see an alien.
Yeah.
They're on the motion sensor. It's tense. You got music, you got darkness, you've got a quick flash of movement, and you're like, oh, we're getting the alien. No. It doesn't feel like Whiplash or like you got something you didn't want. It feels like, oh no, what is she doing here?
Yeah. Well, I think they even do a good job there too, because on that little motion sensor, all you get is one dot. And so you're like, all right, just like the first movie, although this movie for some reason says aliens, you're like, oh, well, it's only one alien again.
Should be more than one.
Yeah. And then, when you find out that it's just Newt, you're like, oh, okay, huh. Well, where's this going? And then later you're like, this is why it's called aliens. It's because of them.
Yeah, their introduction in this movie is like no other. It sells that there's
it is
so
like one
many.
other, but
but it sells that there's a colony of them. Like
yeah,
the amount of beacons that light up in terms of colony personal devices that they're like tracking. You're like, oh no, there's hundreds of those, or at least like 50. And if it's a 1-to-1 and they're all in the same cluster, that's not good, people.
Yeah. And again, I think that's another thing this movie did well was like, all right, so you know from the first one that it needs a human host. And, you know, it's something that Ripley says at the very beginning of this movie is like, they need a human host. And so you're like, all right, they need a human host. But then to like, you know, if you haven't seen the first one, you're like, all right, she's just saying that. I don't really know what that means. But then James literally shows you that they need a human host. You're like, oh, I'm piecing things together, and then if they do need a human host and they have those colonists, then, oh, I do get why it's called aliens now. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, you even get the little, there's just little sprinklings. I think that's why it can basically be agreed upon, like, if you don't feel like watching two movies, Alien and then Aliens, just skip Alien. You get the facehugger being a creepy little thing in the
creepy
vat.
Little guy, yeah.
Creepy little guy in the med bay, and it sells. You're basically like, oh, it went for the head. Like, it's got one purpose.
Yeah.
And not only is it setting up basically what that is and pretty much what you're expecting, but it also sets up like, well, they have them alive still, and even if they're in a vat and being studied, the people who were studying ain't here doing that anymore.
Yeah. You piece it together and it's like, all right, they must have found them. If they must have found them, then that's not good.
No, people. Yeah. It's really bad. Ugh.
I do also like how James, I love how you took the concept of the alien from the first one and kind of expounded on it to make it your own, where in the first one you have the facehugger, you know, the human host that then turns into the xenomorph, and you're like, all right, that's kind of like what he does. But in this one, you get more of a sense of like, all right, you know, they're a hive creature. You know, somebody says that as they're going down into the facility, they're like, oh, the walls, this must be some kind of secretion. And so you get that like, oh, they're building a hive. And then as they're collecting human hosts, they're doing it to make more of their brood. And James did a very good job of making the xenomorphs kind of like bees in a way, where bees, you know, make a secretion to help build up their hives. They build up their hives to, you know, make more of their brood. And it was just kind of cool that it's like, I don't know if Ridley Scott was like, hey, here was my idea for the aliens, or if Ridley Scott was just like, hey, so I just made the xenomorph and you can do whatever the hell you want with it.
I know. It'd be interesting to see, like, was there an H.R. Geiger, you know, Bible of, like, what the xenomorphs are, or, like, morphology or stuff like that? Because the essential, like, worker bee mentality of them, where it's like, bring them back to the hive for the queen. To think there's a queen and not know until this movie, like, what that concept could even be, and you're like, what a treat to just be terrified by the fact that there is some sort of like structure of this xenomorph society that builds on basically nothing. But yeah, it's like they're creating an environment that is inhuman and terrifying, and they build it in a structure that exists, but then by the time you get to it, it's filled with their, you know, their victims and their secretions that make it look just terrifying, just a horrifying, like a place that you would never want to be. And yeah, to just be like, take it one step further, and you're like, well, biologically, there couldn't be one without one, like, producing the thing that you know is the face hugger, like that reproduces. And you're like, well, I guess we have to. But that's the thing. I don't think the movie really prepares you in a way that, again, is not, it's a subversion. It doesn't prepare you for just the standoff at the end.
Yeah.
In terms of a more terrifying creature that is worse and larger and more fangs than any other xenomorph. Like, wow. James, you got me. Because I'd seen the movie before, but it's still such a treat to be like, whoa, that's what that one looks like? Oh, no.
Well, to go along with that too, is that it's not just a queen that it's like, oh, it's not a queen that can't take care of itself. It's a queen that can definitely take care of itself.
Oh, she slays.
Oh, she
slays. Yeah, it's another sort of like James putting and the writers, but again, this feels just like a full-on, you would expect a James Cameron film to do this, where you're like, even the evil, female character is extremely powerful and dangerous and will match Sigourney Weaver, Ripley, in terms of a tete-a-tete. There's no equal to Ripley until you meet this terrifying creature that is suddenly, oh no, this is the bad Ripley. Like their head-to-head is like no other match in this movie.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Because it's like it's weird to be like, well, the foil to Ripley is a terrifying alien creature, but there she is, just right there, just being like, I'm making eggs. And you're like, well, it's got to stop that.
And it's like, I've got my children. And then Sigourney Weaver's like, yes, well, I have my child too. And, I'll fight to the death. Yeah, very, very good. Almost so cool. It's a very good Red Skull Captain America situation.
Oh, yeah. If only the queen pulled out a piano at some point and then didn't play it. Yeah. I'd love it.
It's ooh, Ripley, what are you doing here?
Are we saying the xenomorphs are the hot Italian children in this movie?
They must be.
And they deserve to win?
Yeah. All the queen wants to do is just raise her family and have a good, successful family. I'm rooting for them.
If they weren't so unwholesome about it, I would too. But, oh boy, they're nasty little guys.
Yeah, they're nasty. They're just gross. Another thing I thought was cool, you get that scene near the end where Ripley's in the brood there, and you have those two nasty little guys who come around the corner to protect their queen.
Those nasty little guys.
Those nasty little guys. I was noticing they had like different like head structure than the other xenomorphs.
Oh, did they? It's so dark, but like for them to be sort of like a royal guard makes sense.
Yeah, and so I was again, it made me think of bees, where it's like, all right, bees have drones, which all their purpose is to mate, and so it's like, are these her drones or are these some kind of guard?
There's a lot to it that is established and fully just incinerated at the same time. It's like the perfect amount of what the fuck is going on. Oh, I guess I can't care.
Yeah.
It's going up. It's good.
And then, other movies try and explore those things with being like, oh, well, yeah, there's clearly different classes and they can be impregnated in different things, which make them come out differently and act differently. And it's like, yeah, I guess, but also, this movie just does it right, where it's like, all right, here's these things, we're going to show it to you for a couple seconds and now it's gone. And I think that's just a trend that we keep finding in movies that we keep hitting on and saying is really good, is movies that show you something briefly and then they say, all right, now here's this really good thing, we're not going to hit it too long, and now it's gone.
Would you say disposable though? Because I would say it feels like it should be disposable, right? It feels like something that could be a throwaway, potentially. You're like, it technically doesn't really add to anything. But then, and I agree, it's this like extra detail that you just get to enjoy.
So I could see that. I could see it being disposable and like, yeah, it's like, hey, why come up with all these concepts for different looking aliens and, different things? Why aren't you going to highlight things perfectly if you're not just going to show it to me? But it's like, the point of a movie is to put us in this other reality and let us suspend disbelief from this horrible reality that we live in constantly to look at something else and be like, oh yeah, I'm there.
And in the same horrible reality.
And in the same way that like a good point of something that's not real should be to inspire imagination in us, I think movies that show us something briefly let us have that imagination where you're like, okay, well, that guy who looks like a little royal guard, he is a royal guard. He must have come from something that's different than a human if the human ones look like this. And so it lets you fill in the blanks and lets you think about it. And I think that almost does serve a movie well, where it just lets you, look at Star Wars. Like, half of the reason that those movies were so successful is because it inspired imagination in thousands of people, young people who went and played with the toys and came up with more imagination, and then built more fiction off of that. And I think you could probably say the same for these movies, where clearly they inspired imagination, which inspired other movies. And they had the comic books, and then they've got some really just great video games out there but some also really great video games out there for them.
That's the thing. I 100%. I think Star Wars is a great thing to point at, because Star Wars does that thing where it'll show you a cantina scene with 60 different species of aliens in it, and you can't question it because they're not important to the plot, but you just get to sort of be like, it's aliens.
Yeah.
And this movie is like, here's the alien. And then they go back behind the wall, and you're like, that was it.
That was him.
The guy.
Yeah.
Give him a hand. There he goes. Yeah. I think saying it's disposable is like, if it didn't inspire any additional thought, but because we are currently talking about it and thinking about it, it is like this additional step that we're taking in terms of, well, what the fuck was that guy?
Yeah.
What was he doing over there? That's weird. And then the queen looked at him, and he just said, gotcha, queen, go slay. And there was an element of it where it can be kind of funny. It was campy, I think, in a way that I enjoy. Camp can be extremely fun when done aptly and correctly, and James Cameron gets camp.
Oh, yeah.
100%.
Yeah. I absolutely think so, because, with the Space Marines in this movie, they almost remind me of the Starship Troopers, where Starship Troopers was satire and so therefore over the top. But James Cameron could have been like, all right, these Marines, they're going to be really serious and, kind of uptight and blah, blah, blah. But it's like, no, each of them has armor that's customized. They got different type of weapons. They're goofy. They're silly. They say funny things. And it's like, they're campy in their own way, and not in a way that's satirical to, the military force, but in a way that's just it makes them their own guys.
It's sort of straight up how most modern warfare films treat their Marines is the exact same. They're like, well, they have personality because they have tattoos. They use Sharpies on their helmets. They talk like this. They like these different things. And everyone's just like, just use the aliens template for Marines and you'll have a sort of semi-likable bunch that you can kill off if you need, and you can have more depth of character in that way. It feels like another one of those quick little writing hacks where you're just give them the personality that they are this real living person, and then if they need to be disposable, it's unfortunate, but that's the way warfare in an alien hostile world or in a human hostile world will be. And so it's just the template.
Well, and again, I think it did a good job of inspiring imagination with the Marines, because I was noticing that Hicks had a hole in his armor on his left shoulder.
Yeah.
And then over it said "Born Again." And no explanation for why that is, but it
no way.
You're boom, it clicked the imagination. You're like, all right, how did he get that? When did he get that? Why did he write over that? Very, very cool.
So cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So would you recommend this movie to people, Jimmy? Would you say, hey, sit down, take 2.5 hours of your time and watch some nasty little guys be nasty?
Oh, Aaron, what a silly question you've asked me today. Of course I would tell people to watch Aliens. It is peak. It is peak sci-fi, peak camp, peak action, peak effects, peak all this stuff. 1986, James Cameron knew what the hell he was doing. He nailed it. Every actor, casting was on point. Effects, soundtrack. Oh, the vibes. I gotta get back to the vibes. The scene where they cut the power and suddenly it's all red light, and that is one of the most terrifying sequences that you just get to sort of
live in.
You get it. You get to have it. And you're like, thank you, Jim. That was fantastic. He's taking a little bow. I think you might probably just cut off early for there. But Aaron, what would you say for this movie, Aliens 1986? Is it a watch or a not watch from you?
Well, first I'm going to pass it to Jim because it looks like he has his audio back up. Jim, oh no, now he just fully cut out. Oh, he was supposed to give us his recommendation. Okay. Do you think he's going to pay us back? Do you think he's going to... I could use that money.
I don't think... Well, okay, I could contact my bank and say that it was like... fraudulent.
Okay, next time we're just going to get Sigourney in here. I think she would know how to use Zoom a lot better.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. But to get back to it, Jimmy, I absolutely want to answer this question, and I will answer it right now that I think this movie is a watch. It's absolutely a watch. I think it's a movie that's such a watch that you can either choose, like I did, to watch the first one first or watch this one first. Just go watch it. Rent it right now. Don't rent it. It's on... what do we watch on? Hulu?
Yeah.
Watch it on Hulu. Then go write a message to Hulu to tell them to fix their Watch Party app because it sucks. It's horrible. So but just go watch Aliens on it. It's a movie that I don't know what was going on in the 1980s and especially 1986 where they said, hot take alert. Every good movie is going to come out right now. And you're like,
it's all bangers, folks.
It's all bangers. Oh, and it was. But, 1986 was great, and this movie is also great. Just go watch it, go enjoy it, and then go play Halo and be like, wow, wait, so much of this really is just from Aliens.
Thinking back, I think I must have blanked out that this movie existed, or else I would have been like, hey, this is like James Cameron's Aliens. But instead, I was just enamored by Halo Combat Evolved, and it's...
Yeah.
And it's sort of different story at times, a little different.
A little different. Had a flying robot.
Dude, as soon as the flood is introduced, it's aliens.
It's aliens.
I think that whole level is aliens.
We could ask the question, did this inspire imagination? Did Aliens inspire the imagination of whoever made Halo? Had to. Yeah.
There's too many beats that are... There's motion tracker. There's assault rifles with digital ammo displays. It's crazy how many similarities are just like, well, we wanted to make an Aliens game, but Jim said no.
Yeah.
And he's gone now, so I can make up shit about him. Yeah. This is such a fun movie, and I think fully worth it to watch the first one, but because we're not actually doing an episode, I'm not going to say whether you watch it or not. I'm just saying, like, if you want the full backstory of Ripley, I think it's worth it for that. Because Sigourney Weaver is so good in all of the Alien movies, even the bad ones.
Yeah.
She still rules in the bad movies. And that's something to say. You could just point at it and go, hey, if you want some fun Ripley lore, you got to go back to the first one and see what's kind of going on.
Yeah.
And that's all I really think, because she is such a compelling character in the first film and then doubles down in the second film as the badass, just amazing character in this movie and just like such a hero, singularly saving everyone. And I just love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Sigourney, if you're out there, we're sorry we didn't get you for this episode. We went with James. We thought it would work better. That didn't. But if you want to come on for watching Alien 1 with us, we'd love to have you. Or if you just want to drop a comment that says, hey, go watch Alien 1, we'll go watch Alien 1 for you.
Yeah, just leave it. Make sure you leave it with your verified Sigourney Weaver YouTube account, or else...
Yeah.
I mean, we're not going to follow some Joe Schmo telling us to watch Alien 1.
Oh, God, no. No.
But
hey,
actually,
if you are someone who's out there who's watched Aliens before watching Alien and you thought it, served the movie well, drop that in the comments. Or if you feel that somebody should watch Alien before watching Aliens, put that in the comments too. Let us know. I mean, clearly I'm coming from it with one perspective, and I don't know what, anybody else is saying, so I'd love to get some opinions on it.
Yeah. I think my way of watching movies is generally I'll watch the first one, you know. If it's the start of a series, if it's the start of a franchise, I'll give it a go.
Yeah.
And then, but to be this film as the second one, what a sequel that defies all sequel problems.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's bafflingly good to be a sequel. I think that's why it's great that it's not called Alien 2. It's because it's aliens. It's definitely 57 years in the future, definitely the continuation of Ripley's story, but it is so good.
True. Could you classify, like, yeah, it's almost as if it's a sequel that wasn't intended to be a direct sequel,
Yeah.
but because it has the same character as the first movie is a direct sequel.
I think it's funny because it basically set up the rest of the Alien films to have an out in terms of whatever the hell they wanted to do. They just say, oh, well, someone was cryo-frozen for 200 years. And they did it in Aliens, and it worked really well to establish that things will be different for Ripley. And things can be different for whatever character you want to introduce in the Alien universe later. But, oh boy. Yeah, it works in this one. And I don't know if it works in the other ones. I'll tell you that much. But we'll talk about those at a later date, right? Maybe?
Yeah. Oh,
Maybe.
Dude, I would love to talk about those movies.
Oh.
I think the people out there would be surprised which one of those I would say is a watch, which one isn't.
Oh, boy. Got a lot to choose from, too.
Yeah.
Because is Prometheus at all... Like, the timeline for me gets really weird after Resurrection.
I know it's supposed to be a prequel, and I think it is intended to be a, like, direct prequel.
Oh, yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, timeline-wise, that makes sense. They established the
Xenomorphs.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's a story for another day. But I think this episode, we've come to a consensus mode.
Consensus mode!
Consensus mode activated. I don't think there was a shadow of a doubt of this being a crisis mode at all. Like,
no.
It's just too good.
Yeah. You know, just from even starting the movie and saying, hey, do you want to watch Aliens? And you saying, absolutely, I want to watch Aliens.
I love the feeling that Aliens, this movie gives me. It makes me so happy.
You definitely said something when we were watching it where you said, I wish other movies like this could give me the same feeling that this movie gave me. And I fully agreed with you when you said that, because it was just like, I've seen other movies like Aliens where it's like, there's something that's just not hitting the same way. And I don't know if it's just the vibe or the camp. Something's missing, the heart, the James, I don't know. But it's not there, and I wish more movies did that. I wish more, video games could do what Halo 1 Combat Evolved did.
Well, it's almost like I think there's a part of me that wishes I could trick myself, because there's no way this is a perfect film, but there's so much good stuff to enjoy in this film and to marvel at. It's the sense of marvel.
Oh, great. Now we got to pay them.
Oh, shit. Sorry. It's the sense of like, I get to see all this stuff unfold the way that I do. And it's this execution that I deeply enjoy. So I ate all the popcorn, empty buckets this time.
Of course. You always got to eat all the popcorn. And then when you've eaten all the popcorn, you got to go get more popcorn. That's too much popcorn.
Half of it is on the floor, though, Aaron. I still don't know. I ate all of it, and it's still half on the floor. I don't know what it's doing down there.
It's just too much.
It's just so much popcorn. And I said I ate it all. That's half on the floor.
That's half on the... Jimmy, clean it up.
Oh, maybe I'll do it later. But thank you so much for listening to Too Much Popcorn. That's the show where Aaron and I talk about movies. This one was Aliens, 1986. It's in the title of the episode. You know what we were talking about.
You know. You saw it and you said, I gotta listen to this for Jim.
For old Jim Cameron, again, wish... he's totally gone. Don't have any live feed, unalive feed. Doesn't matter. He's kicking out there. You keep doing your thing, Jim. And whether it's Avatar or not, I'm going to support you. I love your movies. So
yeah.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Too Much Popcorn. If you want to leave a review, do so wherever you're listening. We'd love to see it. Love to see those comments like Aaron was talking about. Right now, we are doing a push for Spotify. If you want to get those listens on Spotify or some other podcatcher that like registers that you listened, that would be great. YouTube's also a great place, but for different reasons. YouTube, you just got to subscribe, I guess. Get ready. Click that bell. Get all those notifications. I don't fucking know. Either way, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.